Get started. Wonderful. Jambo, namaste, konnichiwa. Bonjour, greetings to all of you, and welcome. Welcome to the OWASP Meetup, Vancouver, and the Bay Area. So,
hello. Hi, welcome everyone from the Bay Area. As you can see, this is a joint event between Bay Area and Vancouver.
Awesome. And exactly, these are two chapters that have paired up together today as we have amazing speakers lined up that you'll hear as we introduce them. And the theme today is Get Your Security Dream Job. I'm Arti Gadia, for some of you who know me. I'm your co-host from Vancouver, OWASP. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a big champion for increasing women in STEM and on leadership. Jeevan and Farshad have been fantastic. They've been leading with intention, and I'm proud to say we have achieved 50% gender diversity on OWASP Vancouver board. I currently work for Bug Crowd, and as you can see from my picture, that's my puppy called Simba. And together with me, my co-host, you can't see the picture yet, but it's supposed to be there. We're almost there.
Well, you can't see the picture?
Can't see the picture, but I can see someone swimming.
Someone what? Oh,
Ocean. Yeah.
Yeah, let me fix that.
But you'll see in my picture once it comes up. There we
All
go.
Right.
My dog Simba.
have too many screens.
There we go. So that's me and my co-host here, who will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aaliyah, as Archie mentioned. I'm another co-host of this meetup, and I'm part of a OWASP Bay Area chapter. I'm currently working as a security engineer with Salesforce. I'm very excited for this event. And as you can see on these pictures, while I was working on the slides, I asked Archie to share her picture with me. And I assumed that she will share some professional picture, but then I got this really cute picture of her and her dog, and they're both dressed in red, which is super cute. I'm assuming this is Christmas time. And I thought, let me share my picture of the cat. And this is one of the recent pictures that I found on my phone. So I decided to share with you here. You can see who's the dog person and who's the cat person. Some of the housekeeping items. We have 7 awesome speakers today. And this event is totally for you. So feel free to ask any questions. If you have specific questions for our speakers, please use a Q&A button and submit your questions there. If you have some comments or just want to chat, or maybe you have some questions like you didn't understand a word or jargon that we use, please ask that in the comment section in the chat and just engage with us. We really want you to benefit from this event and to learn as much as you can, and just if you're in the security already, or you're thinking to transition into the security, ask any questions you have, be active, participate in our Q&A and chat, and I'll pass it to RD.
Fantastic. So before we get started with the first speaker, just to get a little bit of audience participation, so we get the hang of participating in the chat, please share either one of your most difficult or your most funniest interview question, or even just a common barrier that maybe you may have faced as part of an interview process if you're currently going through that, or just anything that you can share about a question that you'd like to hear from the panelists. And while you're sharing that in chat, we'll share one story that we had between our experiences of, how we overcame a barrier as we were going through this process. So I know I once had a conversation through a LinkedIn connection, and the executive was hiring for a role that was to build a business unit in a specified region. And I obviously raised interest, and I expressed interest. Now, the role was 100% remote, and halfway during the conversation, the executive couldn't accept that I was based out of Vancouver, and therefore he wanted someone based at another location. After we went further on in the conversation, I educated him a little bit about, it's not about where the person is located. It should be about the individual skill who will get you to that finish line of what you're trying to achieve based on what you're trying to, on the person you're trying to hire. And that's where, I asked him, why is location more important than the person's skill set? And, have a look at a different way of recruiting and hiring. He couldn't answer, but just seeing what's happening today with everything in the pandemic and that working remote is clearly possible. My advice to you is either whether it's location that may be brought up as a barrier or whatever process you're going through, just encourage each and every one of you to speak up. And again, in my situation, because they couldn't hire me based on a location, it's something that we just didn't proceed further, probably not a good fit for either one of us. So again, back to my scenario, working from anywhere with flexible hours needs to be the new norm to attract a diverse talent. And I think we're starting to see a lot of that. If you see a lot of jobs, it says remote or anywhere. So I think we're moving to the right direction. And that's one of the barriers I faced for a long time. And just speak up and ask that question. That was my story and my barrier. Oh, yeah.
Hi, thank you for sharing, Artie. COVID definitely pushed a lot of us uh, to remote work and just to have this experiment that we probably wouldn't have if it wasn't up to the COVID. And like I never worked remotely before. COVID pushed me to have that change. As of me, location wasn't my problem or my barrier. My barrier was coming from a non-traditional background. Like I studied finance for about 3 years, then I dropped out from my university. I moved to the United States. In a couple of years, I was trying myself in different areas until I finally discovered myself in cybersecurity. I came across a nonprofit organization called Year Up, which is a 1 year long program where for the first 6 months, they cover theoretical part. And then for another 6 months, they match you with a company, a cybersecurity company, and you do your 6 month internship. So my internship was with NCC Group. It's a security consulting company. It was very tough going from zero to like hero in security, learning so much. I was tired almost every day, but it was definitely challenging, but it was also very exciting career path. And at the end of my 6 month internship, I got a full-time offer. And after almost 2 years, I decided to go into application security type of role. And just 3 months ago, I joined Salesforce. All right, looks like it's 6:40 already. So let's introduce our first speaker. Slides. I forgot to update this slide, but we had a last minute change. So our first speaker is actually going to be Farshad. Farshad is an innovative technologist with over 20 years of experience in security, software design and development, network and system architecture and management. He has worked for companies for all shapes and sizes, from small startups to global firms such as Intel and Motorola, most recently spending 9 years as a senior member of HSBC's IT security team. He currently leads OWASP Vancouver chapter and is a member of MARS, who organized B-Sides Vancouver. He is a UBC alumni, a CISSP designate, and spends most of his time addressing software security and business challenges when he is not collecting or playing music. He's going to talk about the types of jobs in security. Farshad?
Thank you very much for the introductions. Really appreciate that. Would I be able to share my screen?
Let's try.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Okay, the host is disabled sharing.
You'd have to stop sharing and then that will hopefully allow him to share.
Yeah, and then you probably have to give me the permission to share.
can you try sharing? I
Okay,
assume as
there
the
we go.
panelists should be able to
There we
share
go.
their
I
screen.
think now I can do it. Perfect. Thank you very much for that. So, hi everyone. Farshad here, hailing from Vancouver. Thanks for joining our session. What I'm showing on screen is the map of cybersecurity domains. I see this pop up on my LinkedIn every once in a while, and it's a pretty cool map. It's by Henry Jiang. I can share this link on the Zoom chat for those who might be interested. I saw this and I thought people, when I saw this first posted, people were commenting on how it was helpful to them. And let me just go to this where you get a better view of it. And it kind of shows the different, type of cybersecurity jobs that are out there. You can go into pen testing, risk assessment, red teaming. Red teaming could be application focused, infrastructure focused. You could be doing social engineering. You could be doing blue teaming that, kind of falls under pen testing, or vulnerability scanning, and security architectures over here. There's some security engineering, and then there's all these domains. I'm not I like this. I wouldn't say it's 100% accurate. There's a lot of things that, I wouldn't 100% agree with. There are, in the other diagram, the other picture that I'd like to show is this one. Is from ISO 27002. It kind of shows these different domains that they talk about with respect to security. When we rolled out our enterprise security architecture program at HSBC, we aligned our domains with this. And I think this is a good representation of the domains that exist within cybersecurity. So, we have security operations, access control, information policy, cryptography, communication security. And so somewhere within this, you would have, you would fit in application and cloud security. Where does it fit? It doesn't, again, this is not a perfect diagram either, right? So using a combination of these two things, you can kind of figure out what the broader domain of cybersecurity, what are the subdomains within cybersecurity, and of course within each of those there are jobs. Now, when we talk about security engineering, some of these aren't necessarily engineering jobs. But if we look back at this particular model, would we have a security engineer that's a SecOps engineer? Absolutely. Could we have a cryptography security engineer? Absolutely, we could. Could we have a security engineer that's handling infrastructure? Absolutely, we could. So within a lot of those domains, you could do engineering or architecture or governance, right? Because you could be doing governance within, say, application security. And I think today's conversation was sort of, one of the first questions we wanted to discuss was what type of cybersecurity engineering roles out there, right? And of course, this being OWASP, security engineering roles definitely fall under application security is definitely one of the subdomains within security engineering, and of course, infrastructure, cloud security, network security. Do we want to talk about, I think one of the other questions that was on the list to discuss was what are the differences between those two roles, right? So it really depends. I mean, are we talking about, security engineering, like application security engineering versus cloud security engineering? There's quite a bit of difference if that's what we're talking about, right? And it's not the engineering part, it's really the domain. So when you're talking about application security, that's at the top. You're dealing with a lot of code, a lot of things that were created specifically to provide a specific function or business logic. That application, the code that was created, often sits on top of a platform. That platform is made up of things like a database server, a web server, cache server, all kinds of other things that facilitate that application to run. And of course, the platform sits on top of infrastructure. The infrastructure could be virtual or could be physical. So you could be a security engineer in any of those layers, right? You could be a security engineer that's handling the infrastructure layer, either physical infrastructure or cloud. You could be a platform security engineer, or you could be an application security engineer. And the kinds of things that you would do would be, the type of skill set would be different. Because if you choose to focus on the application layer, then you have to have some familiarity with code and software development practices, and hope ideally have done a bit of software development yourself, so you have an understanding of how that domain works, so that you can tackle its problems. Versus if you pick the cloud as a domain, the types of technologies and frameworks and everything else that's involved will be quite different than the application layer. So in terms of the different skill sets, technically, it would be related to the particular domain that you pick, right? If you decide to be a cryptography security engineer, you get the technical skills there will be quite different than, say, cloud security or application security. Or say in identity access management or security operations. But in terms of soft skills, there's a lot of commonality, right? With a lot of security engineering. I think for me, number one, what has really helped me is reading a lot and having that willingness to spend time and read and learn. A lot of people ask me where I learned all the things that I leverage to perform my job. Is it stuff that I learned in university? And oftentimes my answer is usually no. I mean, university taught me a lot of theory. It was great. It taught me a lot of foundation. But what it really taught me was how to think. All the things that I'm doing, or whether it was in software or in security, I pretty much learned by reading from on the internet. My first job out of university was to build an online e-commerce platform. And I had a very short period of time to do it. And university they never taught us how to write web applications. Or we learned how operating systems work and how the fundamentals of networking works. But we were expected to figure out the programming side. And then I was presented with that challenge, and I rolled up my sleeves and went on the internet and read articles and made it happen. And it was the same thing pretty much for most everything else that I know. When I'll give you another example. When HSBC decided to go into the cloud, and then we formed a security architecture team. No one really knew anything about it. And I was the most senior person there. And I thought, hey, all right, this is my chance. And I just, every weekend I spent time, I got myself free accounts on AWS and on Azure and on GCP. We got the credits and just went and read tutorials and figured it all out. And within a matter of a couple of months, I was creating a secure infrastructure that we were migrating workloads into across the bank. So that's the kind of thing. For me, the most important soft skill is the willingness to spend time and really learn and be excited about it. Right? It doesn't. Not everyone operates in that way, but that's quite important. And then, of course, inquisitiveness is really important. And then the other thing that I think is really important from a soft skills perspective is asking questions and not necessarily accepting what others tell you right away. Like, for example, you might read an article. If you're the kind of person that just reads the first article and just takes whatever they say, that's not going to be that great for you because, on the internet, not everyone writes things accurately. Not everything has been proofread. So oftentimes it's a good idea to ask, don't accept it, ask questions, go and look at multiple places, talk to people, and really understand that topic based on having discussed it and asked questions and not accepting the first answer that came up. And approaching it from a problem-solving perspective, and really looking at that and digging deep and having a lot of patience. I think that patience is also very, very important in this, in any of these security engineering roles. And then I think the other item here that was on the list is general thoughts about security engineering, old school versus new school. I don't know if I have a thought. I mean, I don't really know what old school would be. I don't know if I'm old school or new school. I've been around a long time, but the lines kind of get blurred. I come from a software world, and I think the old school in security engineering world came from a network world. And I think there are cultural differences, and the old school was there were people that just had learned things on their own. They had a lot of control and weren't willing to share. They liked that control. But the world, when I entered the world of security engineering, my first manager, what he told me, he said, "Hey, Farshad, you got to work with these people as if you're one team. You do not treat them in a way that when you come around they run away from you. It's got to be in such a way that when you go towards them, they come to you." And that was my first security job, and that's what I was told to do. So right from there, I'm always about creating a culture of being a part of the same team and not security being separate from the development team or whichever team you're working with, and really working together collaboratively, which I think was not the old school way. But I wasn't there to witness that. And the other item was empowering engineers versus saying no. I'm not quite sure what that one was about. Maybe Aaliyah or Artie, you can elaborate on that one, and I'd be happy to have a discussion about that.
Sorry, could you repeat that question again?
On the list, it was general thoughts about security engineering, right? There were two bullets. One was old school versus new school, and then empowering engineers versus saying no. What was the context on that one?
Around, empowering them, mentorship, using that angle.
Oh, yes. Mentorship is really important. I'm a strong believer. I've had great mentors. I've been fortunate enough, and I've always pushed for it. In fact, our company currently has a mentorship program. We try to take, at least 2 or 3 intakes every year, because where's the next layer of awesome going to come from is by passing down the knowledge that we've all gained as security professionals. And so I think if for people that are trying to get into this field, it's incredibly important to go and get mentorship, to find someone that could mentor them, and vice versa for people that have been in this field. Is incredibly important to pass that knowledge on. And then so again, that's why we run mentorship programs, and within organizations that I've worked at, I've always participated in them and really pushed my team members to go and find mentors where I haven't been able to provide that opportunity for them.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for that quick summary. I loved how you talked about soft skills, and you talked about inquisitiveness, curiosity. I totally agree with that, and to ask questions. We've got two questions, and then we'll move on to the next speaker. The first question is, I'm trying to narrow down my interest for expressing the type of work I want to do. There's just too much that I am interested in. It's a good problem to have in one sense. According to cyberseek.org, there is much more demand in defense than offense. I'm interested in both. But while starting out, would you recommend going for the in-demand category to get into it and learn about a lot of the process, or to aim for the stars without much to back it up?
It's a really good question.
Yeah.
I guess, I guess my first thing was, which one are you more interested in? But I think the answer was, I'm interested in both, if I'm not mistaken, right? I would go with, if both are equally of interest to you, and one has, there's more opportunity in one, and that being the defensive one, I would actually say that that's not a bad thing to do, because I'm a believer in understanding how things work. I think when you understand how things work, you're better able to, tackle the problem. So if you're trying to go on the offensive side, if you've spent some time on the defensive side, you really know the inner workings of things, then you'll probably do better on the offensive side. Now, that's just my personal view on that. So maybe that, hey, things are actually in your favor if there are more opportunities on the defensive side, and also it's actually probably better to start that way. Maybe that's a good place to start if you have no preference. If you strongly are interested in the offensive side, then that's the one I would tackle. But my preference would be to figure out how things work really well before you go on the other side and try to break into them.
Fantastic. The second question is, how do you see this map being effectively used for managers or engineers already in security?
Sorry, Artie, what was that first part? How
do you see this map being effectively used for managers or engineers already in security?
This map that I'm showing on the screen?
I think that's what it's related to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're trying to figure out where your career goes, like I said, this isn't perfect, but it definitely helps, to try to figure out where you want to be. So you can see here, like on the, sort of right side where I'm moving my mouse, right? This is all that sort of things that fall under risk assessment, right? I mean, technically, a pen test is part of a risk assessment, because what you're trying to do is vulnerability assessment is part of a risk assessment, because what are you trying to do? You're trying to find vulnerabilities and ways to exploit the system in order to identify, how likely is it, therefore assess the risk. So, I guess the question is, do I want to go on the risk assessment side? Am I already there? Where do I want to stay on this risk assessment side, or do I want to go into the architecture and engineering side? So to me, it's sort of the build and break, right? Here you're doing the build, you're trying to build strong systems, whether you're engineering them or you architect them, and whatever subdomain within that they are, you're on the build side, and I guess some people would maybe call that the defense side. And then over here, you're on the assess the risk side. So this map can help you to figure out where you are within that. Are you in security operations down here in yellow? Are you in architecture and threat intelligence? Are you in training and career development? Because maybe that's where you want to be. So figure out where you are, and then see, do I want to stay in there? What are the other opportunities within that domain? Or maybe I want to move somewhere else. And where would be what would be the natural progression to migrate into a different domain within cybersecurity? And there are a lot of considerations to be made, right? If you, for example, security operations, then you want to move into application security, then you might have to brush up on your development skills and understand a certain amount of knowledge about coding before you go into that domain. So that this can help with making that career decision.
Fantastic. And one last, just to end on that before we hand over to the next speaker, is I guess maybe what is the first question you ask someone when you're interviewing them?
First question or last question?
Maybe first. Let's start. What's the first question you ask them?
The first question I usually ask them is to tell me the reason they're doing what they're doing. That's always the first question I ask, because I want to hear that there was a story. Like, I don't want to be here like, well, I didn't have a job and, my parents just told me to do this and that's what I'm doing. I'm like, well, I'm probably not going to hire you. I'd like to hear that, this was like something I had an interest or some interesting story, right? Like, that's what my first question. And my last question is sort of, why this? Again, this kind of goes back to the same thing, right? Like, why are you doing this? Because I want people to do things that they're really interested in. Because as we all know, if we're doing things we're passionate or we care about, days will go by fast. You love what you do, and it'll be awesome. But if you're in there, and I remember back in the day when computer science was hot in the .com days, lots of people were going to comp sci just because it was a job. And I had a dear friend of mine. He went into comp sci, graduated, got his degree, then worked with me at Motorola, and he was miserable. And he ended up quitting, and he went into film. Right? It's like, well, but he'd gone into comp sci because it was a hot career category. So don't go into the career category because it's hot. Go in because you'll at the end burn out. It won't be the right thing for you. So that, go in it for the right reasons. And security can be particularly draining if you're not enjoying it. So that's my thoughts on that subject.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Farshad, for your insights and sharing this today.
My pleasure.
I'll pass it back to Alia for the next speaker.
Thank you.
All right, here we go. Our next speaker is Tom. Tom is a cybersecurity talent leader, board member, and panelist. He is a co-founder of a cybersecurity staffing and consulting business, Code Red Partners, that helps technology companies to scale their security programs and teams. He's also heavily invested in the InfoSec community. Tom will be talking about how to land security interviews.
Thank you for the kind introduction. Farshad, really enjoyed that talk, especially the kind of the careers pathways. I get a lot of people reaching out to me that are maybe at the start of their career, and I use that one and CyberSeek because everybody wants to be a penetration tester. They've seen an episode of Mr. Robot and say, how can I get there? They don't understand how many kind of different career paths there are to kind of start off and then navigate throughout. Am I able to share my screen, guys?
Yes, you should be able to share your screen. Okay, I just paused the sharing.
Okay. Perfect. Well, today I'm going to be talking about how to kind of get interviews. Really pleased to be here, and there's a lot of familiar faces on the board, or the panelists today, that excited to be part of this and to run through some of my experience. So I run a practice that specializes in cybersecurity, and I've been in kind of recruitment services for over a decade. Started my career in the UK before moving to the Bay Area. I'm actually in Denver, Colorado now. But I'm going to talk through today 4 main areas. So the 4 areas are: what are companies looking for in a candidate? Second one is how to network and find potential jobs. How to optimize your resume and LinkedIn profile for recruiters. And then finally, should I use Recruiter? Is it right for me at this stage of my career? Or should I continue going through the usual process? So to kick things off, what are companies looking for in a candidate? So very typically, the request that we get through is from a hiring team that maybe haven't hired before and haven't used a vendor. And what that looks like is the purple unicorn of 10 years of engineering experience, usually from a FANG organization, so a Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, and have a 4-year degree from insert high value university. The truth be told is that's every request, but that's not always kind of where the talent comes from. And it's called the purple unicorn or whatever name you want to call it, because it's so hard to find that type of hire. And so because of that unrealistic expectation, I think there's a talk going on next month with OWASP Vancouver around, is the talent gap around the unrealistic expectations of hiring managers rather than the actual entry-level talent. But truth be told, what I did was I actually spoke with quite a few managers in my network that are actively hiring or have hired multiple members of staff. And I asked them kind of, what do you look for in candidates that maybe don't have that level of experience that you would usually ask for, so 5 years plus. So some of the feedbacks I got that isn't about specific, without having that specific experience, is transferable skills. So somebody that's passionate about the industry, somebody that has kind of purpose and has a reason for getting into cybersecurity and why they're motivated by it. And I think Farshad said it earlier, but kind of inquisitive by nature, always thinking kind of outside the box and always questioning. That was quite important for one of the person. Another hiring manager said that in light of experience, something that they look for is somebody that's part of the community, and understands what's going on, has their kind of ear to the ground, and is involved in the community, if that's going to events or part of events like kind of OWASP and others. I will come on to that. And then clear on career path of where they want to be. I know we just kind of shared that kind of careers pathway, but where do people want to get to, and where are they now? And then the final one is feedback that I got was just honest in their ability. There's so many candidates that promise the world or say they can do everything under the sun, and when it comes to a technical test, it's clear that they can't. So I think a lot of hiring managers just want honesty and integrity to say, if you can't do something, that's okay, but just don't say that you can for the sake of it. So how to network with the right people to find jobs. So I just ran through a few other areas here. So kind of main platforms that we use from kind of a networking perspective, and ones I would highly recommend would be the typical ones like Slack, Discord, LinkedIn, even though it was down today. I don't know if anyone saw that. And then other areas like Twitter, GitHub, and Clubhouse, great for networking, for sharing content, reading content, and understanding kind of different platforms of what's going on out there. And there's many conferences, and believe me, I can't wait to get back to being able to attend some of these. But virtually, B-Sides are doing, SF are doing a great job this year, and I've seen that RSA are doubling down on their virtual events as well. Working groups and meetups, there's so many to put here, but some of the ones that I've been involved in over the years is local chapters, so Vancouver, SF, Denver, IC Squared, I've done a talk there before, and then there's some great diversity and inclusivity programs out there, and WISIS and WOSEC are two of those. But my recommendation for anybody that wants to continue networking is just go on to meetup.com, just put local InfoSec events in my area, and see what's out there. And mentorship was mentioned earlier, and I think it's such an important part of the industry and community. If you're somebody that you aspire to be like, or kind of go down that career path, reach out to them and see if there's opportunities for them to mentor you, and try, and if it's application security or cloud security that you want to get into, if there's somebody out there, there's a lot of 9 times out of 10 people are wanting to give back or pay forward, and that's a great opportunity to leverage and learn. The last one is kind of bug bounties, hackathon, CTFs. There's a great story. There's actually someone on this panel that is from the company that hired this person, but from the bug bounty program is a good place to get involved with companies and network. There's a company that recently hired a 19-year-old chap out of France through the bug bounty program, which I think is just incredible. This is a pre-IPO technology company that's just exploded. They've got a huge round of funding, and this person is now an offensive security engineer, and he met the hiring manager through their bug bounty program, just kept on finding vulnerabilities, was communicating back and forth, and then eventually the conversation turned to, keep on finding these kind of bugs and vulnerabilities, would you be interested in a job? Passed the technical test, and yeah, now he's part of the team, which I think is just such a great story. So next one is how to optimize your LinkedIn profile and your resume. So please take this with a pinch of salt. This is, I guess, mine and my team's kind of feedback. So there's always right and wrong answers, and it's kind of, it might be work for you or not somebody else, but this is kind of some of the feedback that I recommend to candidates that I speak to at the start of their career or when they go in for a director level role. So some of the do's of LinkedIn for me is just have a professional photo, It can be of an interest, it can be of a pet, but just make sure I've seen some terrible photos and some unprofessional ones as that. But make sure that the about you is like your resume. So an introduction to your experience to date, and moreover, what you're looking for. Then run through your career experiences, and put in kind of the companies you've worked for and obviously dates. And then recommendations. If you've worked with somebody and it's an internship, make sure you get a recommendation. If you've left the company, make sure you get a recommendation, and your skills endowment will definitely help boost your profile. From the inside looking out, so when my team look for talent, some of the areas or the low-hanging fruit is you can change your status to open to work. During kind of the last 12 months, because of COVID, there has been a filter put over it, which is kind of hashtag OTF, or open to work. I think it's a really valuable tool if you are looking for work. I do see a lot of kind of conversation online about if it's the right thing to do. Does it look like I'm desperate? But if you're looking for a role, you should have that. And I think that recruiters very quickly look for that when they're doing kind of quick searches. Actual job title, if you just put security at said company, you won't always come up in some of the job recruiter fields from using LinkedIn. So always make sure you put in, if you're an application security engineer, rather than just AppSec at a said company. And then skills and assessment, just make sure you fill in that areas out. And then if you're interested in certain companies or you want to work with recruiters, follow their page, and that'll help come up on their optimization as well. Some of the don'ts, just move this up. So some of the don'ts, I recommend not to put your resume on your LinkedIn page. I think that one, there's a lot of kind of data and information that you maybe shouldn't share, like kind of, I don't know, emails, numbers, other details on there. And it's a good way of starting a conversation rather than just someone or a recruiter just reaching out and calling you maybe when you don't want to be contacted. So I'd say not, I'd recommend don't do that. When I see there's people even on this panel that when they put jobs out there, which is saying, hey, I'm hiring for my team, I see a lot of people that just put interested in the comments. And I think that kind of how you got to think on the other side of the fence, how is that kind of received from a hiring manager perspective? If that's all they've put, it takes seconds to write a courteous and professional email or LinkedIn message to say, hi, said manager, I've just seen that job post. I'd be really interested in having a conversation. Can I send you my resume? Rather than just interested, because it's a big frustration, and kind of if that's all they're willing to do, what happens when they get to the interview process? And the last one, again, a point of discussion, don't treat LinkedIn like Facebook. Share things going on in your life that kind of are relevant, but I saw a lot of politics last year. I've seen many different kind of less professional topics to be discussed, but that's one that I think is a grey line. So you share and have some fun, but just bear in mind your future employee is there as well, or could be there. Okay, so the next area is around resumes. I'm just mindful of time, guys. I always say, and 99% of my customers say, just short and sweet resumes. When hiring managers, on-site recruiters, and headhunters like myself, my company, like a one-pager ideally. Some of the best candidates in my network just have a one-pager which run through the high-level experience that they've got. Just so if somebody is just sifting through resumes pretty quickly, that they can see, okay, this person's got the right skills and has the right kind of career trajectory. The typical resume template, and if anyone wants to reach out to me after the back of this, I'm happy to share a resume template to follow with a bit more details. But personal information, name, email, contact, LinkedIn, Twitter at the top. Then key professional achievements. What are you most proud of in your career that are most relevant to the jobs you're applying to? So usually 4 or 5 lines. Then talk about your technical experience. It can be cloud security, it can be the programming languages that you use, or other relevant experience. Then run through your resume, which is the company, the title, and the employment dates that you've had. Lastly, I like to put at the bottom is education and certifications. So anybody that, again, I can help out anyone that wants kind of more information on that or example resumes. Some of the don'ts is headshots. I still see these now. I highly recommend don't put a picture of yourself on your resume. They want to meet them in person. You can do that like kind of on Zoom or in person when we open the world, but I recommend don't do that. Generic cover letters for me, I've had many that have applied to direct companies that have left the previous company on. So, hi, Mr. Manager, I would like to apply for this job at X company, and it's the wrong company, or it's so generic that it's just not relatable. So if you're going to do a cover letter, make it precise on why you're interested in the company, why you're interested in the role. And then last one, again, a discussion point across the industry is with ATS systems or applicant tracking systems, a lot of people just list all the technology in a hope that they'll get through the recruiter screen and they'll get an interview. But the truth be told, if you just list technologies from legacy technologies through to everything you've ever done or even touched, kind of when it actually comes to interview, it just makes your application looks quite weak, because what are you a specialist in? It just looks like you've done absolutely everything there around the skill set. So that's a big one for me. And also, like, kind of applicant tracking systems can be quite painful. So make sure you speak into the on-site recruiter or a vendor if you choose to do that. Which leads me on nicely to, should I work with a recruiter? Now, the truth be told, within kind of partnering with a recruiter is, and I'll just run through some of the kind of areas that I kind of wanted to discuss, is the benefits of working with a recruiter is you get an access to their network. Okay, so a good recruiter can bring great opportunities across a number of different companies. And many of these aren't advertised. Some of the best companies that we partner with, they don't put jobs out there because, say, we kind of represent them and they don't need to do it online. And for great talent, some hiring managers say, if you see X candidate, send them our way. We're always hiring. And so that's a good way to partner with them. For your time and the client's time, it can be time efficient and delivery efficient. Sometimes I just talked about ATS systems and applicant tracking systems. Sometimes candidates feel that when they put a resume in to an ATS, it's like putting it into the black hole or a vortex and just hope that something sticks. Whereas if you work with a vendor, they represent you and ensure that they're motivated to ensure that they get that profile through and ideally get you an interview or at least get you some feedback. They can represent you from a compensation and a contract negotiation if that's something that you're not comfortable in. And a lot of the technologists that are out there kind of like to focus on the work, not kind of focus on the bigger conversations around salary, stock, equity. And then finally, kind of the market knowledge, having industry insights and data points around, well, what position or leveling should I be going for? Like, am I still at senior? Could I contemplate moving to another company that's, say, smaller at a staff level? I'm interested in leadership, all those kind of conversations, and then compensation leveling as well and hiring trends across the market. Some of the challenges that do come with working with a vendor are we've got someone speaking from Netflix today, who I know is very well thought of across Netflix in the industry. Companies like Netflix, they don't work with vendors. And so what that means is you're kind of limiting your opportunity in some sense, because your big companies like your Googles, your Facebook, your Netflixes don't use a vendor. They have such big teams that if you work just with a recruiter, you can't apply to a lot of these companies. And sometimes some of these vendors that you do speak with don't have terms across the board. So that's one consideration. Non-specialist recruitment agencies, the biggest frustration I get from candidates in my network is speaking with non-specialists within security, and they've applied for a network security engineer, and then a week later they're being spammed with technical program managers, QAs, the list goes on. But like, that's where it can kind of become frustrating, and people have put off by that. Company culture, lastly, or kind of penultimately, is that some of these on-site recruiters understand the culture and the nature of the company, and that sometimes can help navigate that. A good agency understands that and wants to do that when they're partnering with a company, but some don't. And then lastly, it is an expense to a customer. It's pretty expensive to use a recruiter for multiple hires. And then just finally on is a recruitment right for you? If you are going to use a recruiter, you need someone that you can trust, both with professional integrity and expertise in delivery. My key 3 things I'd recommend anyone that was considering using a recruiter would be speak to your network. I guarantee that somebody will know somebody that's recently changed jobs and used a recruiter. See who they recommend and maybe make an introduction there. Second one would be find a specialist that covers either the job that you want or the discipline or area that you operate in. And then finally, once you've done those 2, don't be afraid to do an interview or kind of have some conversations with some of the vendors. Make sure they're right for you, because they might be right for somebody else that's recommended them, but you want to make sure that they're on your side. Again, trust and integrity are a big thing there. And you also want to find out kind of who they work with, is relevant for me, and what opportunities do they have on boards right now, because it could be wasting your time straight away if they don't really have that many opportunities in your time. And that's me, guys. Sorry for waffling on.
Awesome. Thank you. We've got 1 minute before we hand off to the next speaker, but in that 1 minute, one question for you: is cover letter a requirement?
Absolutely not. I think that kind of I think it helps when applying for something. It shows that kind of, I said it earlier around like passion, purpose, and being kind of inquisitive. I think it takes a long time to do a cover letter for every single job, but I think it shows interest, and it shows that you're not applying for absolutely everything, spamming the world and hoping something sticks. So it's not a requirement, but I think it's a good use of your time if you're serious about making a move.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Tom, thank you for your presentation. And there were a lot of questions asking you to share your slides. Would you mind sharing your slides with the audience, or maybe like sharing the link with me later?
Yeah, of course. Just to clarify, they were shared throughout the presentation, right? People could see them.
Yes, but it looks like we want to look at one.
Okay, yeah, no, of course. I can share my slides after, and if somebody would like, if anybody would like the resume breakdown of how we recommend to use it, I can help out with anything there. My details are on the OWASP website.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. That was a great presentation, breaking down all the resume and how to like get into security. Let's move on to our next speaker, and I will need to share my screen for that. All right, this is our third speaker, Walta. Walta is a senior technical recruiter at Netflix. She has 4+ years experience of interviewing and hiring senior engineers and leaders across the company. Not only it is important to ace the technical interview, the culture interview is equally, if not more important. Walta will be talking about how to ace a culture interview. Walta, are you here right now?
Hang on, I think maybe Walta might be in the participant.
Yeah, she's in participants.
I'll try and figure that out. Give me a second, yeah. Walta, if you don't mind putting your hand up in the participant side so I can quickly find you.
All right, I just promoted you to panelist. You should be good to go.
All right, can y'all hear me?
Yes. Hi, Walta.
Hi, sorry about that. Glad we got that figured out. Hi, everyone. My name is Walta. As was mentioned, I'm a recruiter here at Netflix. I've been here now for getting close to 5 years, and majority of that time has been spent partnering with our security team and building it out. So I live and breathe security to a point where love it so much. And it's also at the same time made me paranoid in a good way, obviously, but really excited to kind of talk through kind of the cultural piece and the culture interview, since it's a really, really big part of just how we assess candidates here at Netflix. I do want to add a disclaimer as we kind of talk about this. I'm specifically just going to be sharing kind of my personal experience, both as a recruiter and as a recruiter at Netflix. I can't speak for all recruiters in the same way that I can't speak for all companies, since every organization and every individual recruiter is different. So I want to just add that disclaimer there. But I kind of wanted to touch on a couple of different aspects when it comes to kind of the culture interview, common mistakes that I tend to see candidates make. And then on the other side, what I typically look for when speaking with candidates, some of the areas that I assess for, and just kind of give some tips there. But one of the common mistakes that I see from candidates when it comes to kind of that cultural interview, that conversation with HR and recruiting, is that they just don't take it seriously or think it's more of a formality that they have to go through throughout the interview process. And I get it. I think that might be the case at some other companies. Here at Netflix, it's a big part of our interview loop. As recruiters and as members of TA, we partner really closely with our hiring managers. We know their teams in and out. In some cases, we've helped them build their team from the ground up. So it's a true partnership with, recruiting and hiring managers. And so these interviews and these conversations do have a lot of weight to them. There have been several cases that I can just think of where, my hiring manager has talked to somebody and they were great from a technical perspective, but then when I talked to them, it was almost as if we talked to two completely different people, just in the way that they showed up and how seriously they took the conversation. And that ultimately did affect whether or not we did choose to move forward. And so take these interviews seriously. They do matter. They do highlight a lot about the candidate, and it also gives you an opportunity to learn more about the company and ask some of those questions that maybe you have that maybe didn't have a chance to talk to the hiring manager about. The other kind of common mistakes that I tend to see is that I think oftentimes candidates assume that all you really need to do in an interview is prove that you're strong from a technical perspective. And while that is important, as I kind of mentioned in my bio, the cultural piece is equally, if not more important. One of the things about Netflix that we have is our infamous kind of culture memo. And in there, we talk about how we don't want brilliant jerks. And brilliant jerks being people that are brilliant, really smart, really capable at their job. But to put it frankly, just kind of jerks, not great people to be around, not people that you want to work with, not inclusive and not great collaborators, excuse me. And so that's one thing that we also look for when we are assessing candidates, is how they show up, how they interact, not just with the hiring manager, where I think a lot of people tend to show up the best, obviously, because that will be your manager, but to everybody in the panel, including those on the recruiting and HR side. Because I think for us, that shows a lot about a person's character and just how they interact with different people based on how they personally perceive their importance or whatever the case may be in the interview loop. And so to kind of dive in terms of what I typically look for in candidates and just some of the areas that I like to assess for and give y'all some tips hopefully as well. One of the big things that we assess for is communication skills, which I know is a very broad term, but that can really boil down to so many different aspects. How are you explaining the work that you're doing? Are you explaining it in a way where you are getting super technical and in the weeds? Or are you able to tailor your communication to your audience? For example, for us, security is a super cross-functional organization. They're working with other security teams, engineering teams, and maybe even some non-technical stakeholders. And so you have a wide variety of people that you'll be partnering with a wide variety of technical knowledge. So are you able to tailor your communication based on who you're engaging with and still relay the message that you're trying to relate? Are you long-winded? Or are you able to relay the same information in a very concise but clear way? I have a story here where I think this was a couple of weeks ago where I was actually talking with a candidate on the phone who, talked to the hiring manager, had a great conversation. I jumped on a call with them, very long-winded, and talked for a solid 7 minutes straight. And I remember trying to interject to try to see if I can pivot the conversation or at least ask one or two more questions. And they actually stopped me and said, "Hold on, let me finish what I'm saying and then you can talk." So as you can imagine, we did not move forward with this individual for a variety of reasons, but your ability to kind of be self-aware in those situations and clearly articulate and describe what you're doing. The other thing is that, are you able to kind of clearly articulate what you're looking for? And this is an interesting piece because I mentioned that I partner with our security team, and that's the entire organization. So I have a pretty good sense of each of the different security teams within Netflix. And so if you're able to kind of clearly articulate what you're looking for outside of, I often hear, I want to work on interesting problems or big challenges, not super clear. But if you're able to kind of talk through the specific security aspects of what you're looking for, maybe you're interested in bug bounty, as Tom mentioned, or vulnerability management, or maybe you're more interested in kind of the instant response side, or maybe you're really interested about privacy work. It helps us know that, okay, based on what they're interested in, this role may not be the best fit. So let's actually pivot them to another team where I think there's better alignment and push them in a direction where we think it's a better match. Another piece, which I think was touched on by the other two panelists already, was kind of this piece around aptitude. One of the big things for us and how we assess candidates is we're not looking solely for somebody who kind of fits all the technical marks. Aptitude is a big thing for us. And it's okay if you don't, have 20 plus years of experience or came from an engineering background with a CS degree. It's really about your aptitude and what you can learn on and how you're able to kind of hit the ground running and your willingness to kind of learn new things. And that can show up in a variety of different ways when it comes to how we assess candidates. It's, maybe you are a software engineer and you're interested in security. So in your free time, you, as mentioned earlier, contribute and to bug bounty programs or contribute to open source, or maybe you're working on learning kind of these new skill sets outside of your day-to-day job. Some of those different anecdotal things actually do play a role in how we think about candidates and whether or not they'll be a good fit for the team, and can be really, really good things to call out too if you haven't already done so in your interviews with other companies and other recruiters. The other thing too that's big for us is just kind of your motivations and why Netflix. I always hear this answer a lot when I ask this question of, I'm interested in Netflix because I like movies, and that's great. I also love movies. I love TV shows. I love a rainy weekend where I can just sit on the couch and binge watch Netflix, but I kind of want to hear more. I want to hear that you've done your research on the company, and specifically, again, talking about the security team. They're a super active group. They contribute a lot to open source. They contribute a lot to conferences. There's a multitude of YouTube videos that we have and tech blogs and just different artifacts. And so I want to kind of get a sense that you've done your homework, that you've researched the team, that you have an idea of why Netflix from kind of that engineering standpoint, outside of the, I like movies and it's a cool product, which is great. And I love that. But again, I want to get kind of a deeper answer. The other piece there too is, are you running towards Netflix or are you running away from your company? And it's a big difference when you think about it. It's kind of this idea of running away from a problem, maybe running away from an issue at your organization that can look in a variety of different ways, or are you running to Netflix because you're really excited about these certain challenges? I think it's totally okay to obviously leave the company if there's a situation there that's just not ideal and not great. But kind of going back to what I said earlier, I also would still be curious to better understand why Netflix and what specifically is drawing you to this team and to this organization and that sort of thing. And then the last big thing that we typically look for is one of the infamous things about Netflix is our culture memo, which if you haven't had a chance to take a look through it, I highly recommend it. It's on our jobs page actually. But it talks in detail about the Netflix culture. Super transparent, super open, super candid. And it's actually something that we send to candidates, all candidates, really early on in the interview process. And it's a conversation that we start really early in those initial kind of recruiting phone screens. Because the Netflix culture is really unique, we send that memo because we really want people to start kind of reading it and understanding kind of the different aspects of what makes Netflix Netflix, to ask questions and also kind of self-select if this is the right environment that they want to be in. For some it is, and for some it's not, and that's totally fine. But that kind of curiosity, that awareness, that interest in really understanding Netflix, not just from a technical perspective, but from a culture perspective too, and really making that an aspect of how you think about the organization and the company and whether or not this is the right fit on both sides. And then lastly, before I kind of leave it to Q&A, a couple just things to know. I really, really want to highlight this point of recruiters are your advocate. I know we can all probably think about times where we've had, negative recruiter reactions. I think sometimes recruiters can get a bad rep, and I understand where it's coming from. As a recruiter, I've also had not so great interactions with recruiters at other companies. So nobody is immune to it, unfortunately. But just know that speaking for myself and for the Netflix team, we are your advocate. As much as, hiring managers, for example, want to fill their roles, we want to help them fill it as well and get the role off our plate. And if we're really excited about you, we are wanting to do anything and everything we can to get you at Netflix, whether it is for the role that you're interviewing for, or if we can pivot you somewhere else, if for whatever reason that doesn't work out. So just know that going into it, and really treat these conversations, treat these interactions the same way that you would treat other interactions. It's not a formality. It really does matter. And those folks who really are really respectful, who are really engaged in the conversation, who really understand the importance of this, really are the ones that end up doing well throughout the interview loop. It's truly a holistic interview process and how we assess candidates, not just from a technical perspective, but also from a cultural perspective.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Walta. That was fantastic. I mean, I was just writing down a lot of things that you mentioned. Do your research on the company. Even I just look at some of the great interviews that I've had in the past is do your research on that individual. There's something that we connect, right? Like I think someone wrote in there Swahili in the chat, right? Straight away we connect, right? And we have something to talk about. There's a really interesting part that you talked about culture. And I love that question that I see here in the Q&A. I heard that fitting in with the company culture is hugely important. However, I have never had a culture interview. Could it be broken down a bit more?
Yeah, I can try to explain it from my perspective. And some companies will call it a culture interview. Oftentimes it's typically that interview that you'll have with HR or recruiting. And again, speaking specifically to Netflix and our interview process, but typically the culture interview can happen kind of in the recruiting screen stage, and then also depending on the interview loop on the onsite. And that's really what we're assessing from a culture perspective, some of those things that I talked about, your communication skills, whether or not you'll be fit for Netflix based on your partnership standpoint and how you approach kind of cross-functional collaboration from an aptitude perspective and genuine interest in Netflix. Some of these more non-technical components that still weigh heavily on whether or not you'll be a successful individual in the company, but maybe are assessed in different ways.
Fantastic. Awesome. The next question I see in the chat is, what is the best way to get noticed by Netflix recruiters or just recruiters in general for security positions, especially given that you have so many candidates submitting? How does that one stand out, right? Or how does one get noticed when you've got so many?
Yeah, great question. Best way to kind of get noticed is just reach out directly. I have my LinkedIn there. And so feel free to reach out to me, or if you do your LinkedIn research as what I think Tom mentioned earlier, reaching out directly to hiring managers as well. The thing that I will say to this kind of two parts is when you do reach out to a recruiter or when you do reach out to a hiring manager, be really clear about what you're looking for. I often will get messages from folks that saying, hey, Walta, I'm interested in engineering positions at Netflix. Let me know if you have something. And that doesn't really help me out as much. It's putting the onus on me to kind of figure out for you what you want and what you would be good at, versus saying, hey, Walta, I looked at the jobs page. I'm really interested in this application security role. Would love to talk to you more about it. So that's one way that I would approach it. The other thing too is that should you message somebody on LinkedIn, make sure your LinkedIn profile has details and information on it. I've seen so many people apply to roles where they'll apply with their LinkedIn, which is totally fine, but I get on there and there's nothing on there for me to kind of get an idea of their background, the type of security work that they're doing, things like that. So I think it's great to go ahead and reach out directly. Again, I work with our security team. I've hired people who directly messaged me on LinkedIn, but just know that be specific about what you're looking for and also make sure that your profile is built out.
That's awesome. Great advice there. Another question, which I think I started off in the beginning with a barrier that I faced based on my location when I was applying for many US-based companies because I'm based in Canada. I see a question here is that now through this pandemic, since everyone's moving towards remote work these days, are there any restrictions in general from companies or positions from other countries to work remotely? Do you see that as barriers moving forward?
Yeah, I think this is something that Netflix as an organization is starting to really look into. I think to the question's point, the pandemic has really caused us to kind of reevaluate our thoughts around remote work and things like that. Again, specifically with security, there are teams that are open to having people remote in the same way that there are teams who decided that they do want people to be co-located in the same location. So the way that we've typically handled it is that it's done on an individual team manner. And so there are some, I guess the short way to say it is that yes, there are teams who are open to it, but at the same time, there are some teams who unfortunately are not at this time.
Fantastic. And let's see, what other questions, since we've only got one more minute. Any additional last minute tips that you can share with 1 minute left?
Oh, last minute tips that I'm trying to think of what I haven't shared already. Like, I think the biggest thing is take the time to prepare for these interviews. I think sometimes people can get really nervous, and I try to do my best to kind of ease people's nerves, but just knowing kind of what I talked about of some of the questions that you'll typically get in those culture interviews, they're questions that you can easily prepare, even just simple notes around when asked about how you partner cross-functionally with teams, talk about a specific project versus talking about anecdotally what you would do, share examples, be specific, kind of highlight your work in those areas and kind of go about it from that way.
Actually, you bring a really good topic about sometimes people get nervous, and it doesn't, in an interview, when you're interviewing somebody, does this have an impact on what they're saying eventually, even though they're nervous and they might not be able to articulate it well enough? How have you handled that? Because I know there's a lot of individuals out there, they come back saying, oh, I don't think I did it well. And they get the bad news, right? How much do you try and make the person feel comfortable? How much do you weigh on that? Like, it's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And like I said earlier, it's super common to get nervous. I get nervous. Everybody gets nervous in interviews. And I think it's somewhat easy to tell if somebody's nervous. And so I think from my experience and from the experience of the folks that I do work with, we do try to make it as comforting as possible to kind of give people space to calm down, be super understanding if, maybe you forget something in an interview or say something in a way that maybe you didn't intend, but you kind of were hoping to get the point across. And so we try to be super understanding in those situations. It's again, super common to be nervous, but we try to do everything we can to kind of ease people a little bit and give them space and realize, like, it's okay, it's just an interview, it's not the end of the world. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you so much. And exactly to your point, I mean, just to end on to that note, like earlier, the speaker earlier said, it's okay to say I don't know, and you can come back. I know I've used that later on that evening. I go back and I email them saying, thank you very much. By the way, I didn't answer this, but now I have the answer for you. It's okay.
Absolutely. I'd rather somebody says I don't know than try to BS their way to an answer that just doesn't make sense or land well. So it is 100% okay to say I don't know.
Wonderful. That was so inspiring. Love all those tips. Thank you for sharing. And thanks again for joining us. I will pass this back to introduce the next speaker, Alia.
All right. Thank you, Walta, again for presenting. And we're moving to our next speaker, Colin. Colin, she is the CISO at Segment in San Francisco. Role is building holistic security and trust programs to protect customer data. Previously, she did the same at Twilio, pre-IPO and post-IPO as the Senior Director of Trust and Security. She's also served in security leadership positions at more traditional enterprise companies like First American Title and CoreLogic in Southern California. Colin's goal is to advance the security culture past just having some infrastructure people do it, to creating a comprehensive program where everyone in the company takes ownership to improve the company's security posture every year. And Colin will be covering interviewing for management and leadership roles today. Hi, Colin.
Hey, thanks for the intro. All right, so what I have prepared for you all is I don't have really cool slides like Tom, and that's like note for next time, but there were a bunch of questions that I prepared for in advance that some of the folks had submitted to me. So I do have those questions and I'll be reading off those answers. And if in that Q&A that I ask myself, essentially, if you don't find the answer that you're looking for, I'm happy to check out the Q&A. All right, so this is really aimed at you are a manager or you want to be a manager and you're applying for a new job and you're like, oh my gosh, like, first of all, I hate looking for jobs. Second of all, what's the best way to present myself? So for this part, if you're an experienced manager doing, it would be like cloud security, product security, CERT, or GRC, it doesn't really matter where you're coming from, as long as you fall under that like security or GRC umbrella. One of the most important things that you'll want to express if you're experienced is, how do you build your program and your team? So back in the day, some security people who are not us, none of us, were sort of known for being kind of random, right? So you would bring a security person on who presumably was supposed to lead an area and build out an area, and the rest of the company felt like that security leader was just randomly picking things out of the sky and running from thing to thing and just working on that and deciding to hire a person to handle that thing, one person to handle this thing. And so there's this sort of disjointed, what is your plan, security leader attitude. And so to avoid this, when you're sitting in the interview, you want to really talk about, how do you envision building out a complete security program? Imagine that you're at this company for 5 years or 10 years. And you've done a little bit of research on it. We'll say it's Segment. And if you first came to Segment and you're like, gosh, they have no security people, that seems like a problem. And then, they operate in the cloud. They're a SaaS company. And so maybe they have an outsized risk for their cloud security. Maybe they're not doing their security in AWS so well. Not only that, but it seems like there's a lot of really smart people, but new grads. So not so many people who've worked in a formal setting before. They haven't worked with really great AppSec people to train them on how to create secure code, et cetera, et cetera. So these issues of these formalities, you kind of take notes and make a guess. And the way that you would approach that person who's hiring you is, it's like, I'm not just going to randomly spam all my friends and say, hey, do you want a security job? Like, let's just descend on the company. It's figure out what the company needs. So you do a little bit of recon and see where they operate, maybe who their adversaries might be, and maybe what some of their long-term problem areas might be. That gives you the beginning of the map. And then, if you can do some sort of gap assessment, sometimes it's great to get access to people on Twitter. If they will talk to you generally, you can check out other people's talks. If they don't have any security people, and check out any engineering blogs. Check out any engineering talks that they might have, where the speakers will inadvertently reveal details about how their setup is. And with all this recon, you can start putting together like a prototype of, how would I build out this program and team? And where you want to come forward with is, you could put slides together during your interview, you can present them, and you could say, this is subject to change. This is just the outside looking in. But from what I see, it seems like you probably have an outsized risk on AWS, and you probably don't have a lot of great AppSec that's happening. So the first things that I would tackle are that. And here's what I would try to build. So you start putting the first pieces of the roadmap together directly in front of them, so they can see what your thought process is. It's super important to let people in, and instead of giving them this idea that you're just like going into a security superstore, getting a cart, and then grabbing whatever security person or tool or thing off the shelf and just throwing it in and running to checkout. It's not a race. It's like a chess game. So how are you going to outsmart your adversaries? How are you going to address the risks the company already has? And then a next level thing you could do is, you could ask them before the interview, how do you see the company growing in the next 2 years? Are you expecting, a 20% or more growth in EMEA or other parts of the world? Are there different sectors that you're trying to get into? Are you trying to appeal to enterprise more? And so all of this recon will feed more information into like that prototypical plan that you will lay out for them. And so, so then we'll say they hire you, which is amazing. So congratulations. So now you have the job and you have the beginnings of this list, this plan. As you are talking to people to bring them on to these first important areas, it's really important to motivate them. And so if you're working at a small company like a startup and you're sort of building something from scratch, one of the most important things you can do to motivate people is tell them, what was your journey coming here? Oh gosh, I just got here 4 weeks ago, and there's just so much to fix. But the way I see it is this. Here's the beginnings of a plan. And I see you, Leaf or Jeevan or Ella, I see you owning this one section here based on your background. How would you like to sit through a 5-year vision exercise with me, where I tell you where I think we need to be as a company in 5 years, and then you tell me, what you think you'd like to build up to get there. And I found that that's really exciting to attract good leaders, because a lot of people don't necessarily want to be a cog in a giant machine. They want to know that, you know, they have this sandbox area, and you've given them permission to build out a security program and their team the way that they see fit. Maybe the place that they're at now, they're just like, gosh, there's so many mistakes. I work at XYZ big boring company and we do all of these mistakes. And you're like, you know what? You don't have to make those mistakes, or you're free to make those mistakes here, but you're the person who's going to be the architect. And so sharing what your high level plan is if you're at the top leadership level, attracting people at a slightly lower leadership level and letting them know how much freedom and flexibility they have. And just making sure that every single person you hire is really mapped to that overall big roadmap and the smaller roadmaps, then people feel connected to the job. They don't feel like they're just knocking out tasks. Another thing that's important too is that, you know, all of us security folks, we have our idea of what is the final end state. What does perfect AppSec look like? What does perfect CloudSec look like? What does perfect CERT look like? How much automation is there? And so we have a tendency to get lost in our own dreams, and we get very excited when we bring great people from the security community. Maybe we've met you at meetups and now we're all working together and we have our bubble and we're delivering on this stuff. What starts to go missing at some point is you need to make sure that you are showing alignment between what you're doing, these roadmaps that you're putting together, these specific milestones you're achieving, and what the company goals are. So, you know, in the beginning, when you were talking and trying to get that job and you were making that promise, because they were like, yes, we're going to see a 50% growth, hopefully in EMEA in the next 5 years. Well, it's not just your job to roll out your security program the way that you think it should be rolled out. You need to make sure that you are creating these touch points between your security roadmap and getting them that EMEA business. And so one of the things that you can add on there is like, if I don't know too much about EMEA and what they might recommend, for doing business for vendors, maybe I need to get a GRC person in here sooner rather than later who has a specific expertise in Europe. Maybe they can tell me, you know, like, here how the political winds are shifting. Here's the first European office we should open up should be in Dublin. We should make, you know, we should have like drinks or whatever, well, not during COVID, but drinks in a non-COVID time with this person in Dublin. This will really help set us up. And so you need to make sure that as you and the rest of your security team are building out the dreams of your security team, you need to keep making sure that you always map back to that multi-year plan that the person who hired you, you know, wanted to have you check in with. And the next question on here is, what's the secret to managing up and managing laterally? It's not a secret, because if I could just tell it to everybody and they would just learn it, then I think all of our problems would be over. The catch here is, you know, you're building out the security team and the program, things are going well. Maybe you have, like, you're starting to get certifications and your practices are starting to get cleaned up. So European companies don't look at you like side eye and just be like, ugh, you're a gross startup and I don't want to do business with you. You're actually making headway. Well, you need to find a way of rolling up that those successes and talking to the executives and talking to the board. The reason why this is important, because many of us, I think, are a bit shy unless we're talking to other security people, is we have this feeling that executives don't care, or board members don't care, or maybe they care, but they don't understand. And if you've been in this industry a very long time, you are suffering from something called the curse of knowledge, and it is real. I do have a recommendation. It's a book called Made to Stick. It's like an orange book with like a masking tape on it. The curse of knowledge is what security people suffer from. And so have you ever seen reports that go up to a board level and it says like, firewall says how many attacks blocked or whatever it is? A board member doesn't care about that. It's not relevant to them. They need the conversation to change to reducing overall risk to the company. You know, they need to look at it like they're standing side by side with you and they're looking over at the battlefield and they're seeing like the invaders coming in. Who are those invaders? Are they a different company? Are they attackers? What's the vector? And what are we doing here to mitigate that risk? And having a really clear and crisp way to measure that. So, you know, we see that there are these giant problems, and those problems do affect us because we happen to be in this industry and we use this technology stack. But here's what we're doing on our list of OKRs or roadmaps to help squash that down. And every quarter that goes by, you want to measure, and how effective is that? You know, how much safer are we today than we were a quarter ago because we're doing these things? It is challenging. That is definitely next level security management. I will tell you that most security managers I know fail at this because we have a tendency to cling to what we know. We have a tendency to go only to the audiences who appreciate us the most. But the thing is, those aren't the people who give you more headcount. Those aren't the people who give you more money. And so you have to train yourself in their language. You have to train yourself to think like them, to be scared of the things that they're scared of, and to translate what you have, which is this infinite wealth of knowledge, into a one-pager that they can understand. And at the end of it, they feel like they learned something and they're motivated to help you. And at the very end of that, maybe there's like a clear ask that you could make of them, you know, give me $5 million. And if you've done your job well in that one pager, you will get your $5 million or 50 or whatever it is you're asking. And so trying to get that perfect job, not everyone is a very experienced manager. So what if you're ready to step up into that role? You know, perhaps you've been a tech lead, or you've had like the unofficial, you know, you don't have the title, but you've had the unofficial job of being the manager. Well, you'll still want to be able to answer some of those questions. You want to have like the beginnings of it. You will not have to be held accountable the same way that a CISO would. That's just not even fair. But you're going to have to pull on your related leadership experience and map it to the security manager job. So some of the things you could use for that is perhaps you could do a deeper dive into the quality elements of doing something like, if you managed a large security incident as an IR coordinator, maybe you include details about how you sent out daily comms with TLDR, which is like an executive summary with technical details, clear action items. And then if you had to write comms with the customer, like, I'm sorry when that has to happen, but sometimes it does, including that you had to reach out to a customer under like very hostile circumstances and explain this to them and keep them updated. When you're talking about that IR situation, you want to show that you had ruthless follow-up if you're that coordinator, that you led the postmortem, and through doing that, you assigned action items to prevent this thing from happening again. So that shows that you can create a virtuous cycle. So you being involved, making sure that you're not just good at knocking out the problem every time it shows up, but how about we knock out the problem and that same problem doesn't show up again. So that's how that would work for you. And then, you know, it would be nice if you could pull something up like a final internal comms to your company. So ceremoniously bury that incident. What do those comms look like? And then how did you transform that incident that was an unfortunate thing that you and your team had to handle into a weapon, a tool, a reason to get what you needed? I think that's a good end-to-end story. And so even if you've never formally managed before, it really shows the way that you think about security is holistic. You know, you're thinking about over like the company's lifetime. Another way is, you know, if you don't happen to do incident response, if you're somebody who is great at chatting up candidates, maybe you're super good at sourcing, maybe your recruiting team has put you on the panel. And so you're responsible for a particular interview that happens over and over again. And maybe you're doing this with high quality and, you know, they love you for it and you always get great signal. You know, and how you would know that is your assessment on whether they should hire this person or not and why. It's rarely wrong. Like, those people are still working there and they're advancing. Another thing that could be representative too would be like, do you stand up in front of the company and represent your team in like internal forums? So think about like an ops review or an all hands. You know, have you had to synthesize like what you're working on and how it relates to the rest of the company? Why should a customer care that you're working on this vulnerability management thing? You know, do you have a way of talking about what you do, what your team does, and what your sister security teams do in relation to your company's success? Another thing is, like, for a lot of the folks who are already participating here, we have a ton of people who are active in, you know, the OWASP chapter meetups, conferences. If you're well known in the security community, folks will want to come work for you. And not only will it make it easier for you to go hire, but it'll make it easy for you to get hired. So even if you don't necessarily have that, that official leadership title, they'll see that you're providing leadership to your community. They'll see that you have follow through, that you can be depended upon. Maybe you have stage presence. I don't know, you do your hair good. You always wear like really awesome Hawaiian shirts when you get on stage. But there is a little bit of element of celebrity in the security community. And I think that you should not ignore it. If you are somebody who doesn't really like to be up on stage because that's not your thing, what have you published? Is there something that people could point to where they could see that, and sorry for using this phrase, that you're a thought leader in a particular area, because that's still leadership and you don't have to like comb your hair and put the crown on and whatever it is. The other thing that you can use if you don't necessarily have that formal leadership experience is any sort of long-term mentoring experience. So this is also down to your ability to tell a great story. And this isn't intermittent help that you give to somebody occasionally. It's like you investing in someone as your mentee, and you'd want to describe where this person started out. How are their technical skills? How are their organizational and communication skills? How is their follow through? What did you do to get them to work on those skills? How did that turn out? What was the outcome? Where are they now? And so being able to tell a story like that, even though you haven't formally managed, is saying, I know how to like bring someone into the fold, assess where, they're getting in their own way, and help them unblock themselves, give them hints, keep checking in with them. I don't just like, I'm not like a sometime parent and I drop in and I'm like, looks good, I'm out of here. No, you actually like, you stay until they graduate, which is great. So that's another avenue if you haven't had formal management experience. And then really for all managers, like you need to answer those why questions. So the previous speaker was talking about like, well, why Netflix? Are you running to Netflix or are you running away from a bad job? So similarly, think about why you want to either become a manager if it's your first time, or why do you want to continue managing? They will ask you this in some form or another, and the people who would be your potential employees there would want to know what kind of a manager you are. Think about what all the bad answers to why you want to become a manager are, and make sure you never say those things. I've heard things like, because it'll give me power over people. Someone actually said that to me and I was like, instant no. And some people said, well, I feel like I deserve it because I've been an IC who has been growing, and then the next logical step is manager. I was like, that is not the next logical step for an IC because it's a different job. But yeah, think about what a great set of answers are. Make sure that they're authentic. And I would say even rehearse them. Because you want to be able to articulate why you want to lead other people. It is not an easy job. And particularly with security management, you'll get beat up every once in a while. And so what's going to keep you motivated during those tough times when you take a couple gut punches from your fellow engineering managers or an E-team member? Okay. And then another thing that they may ask you is like where you may want to end up in your career and why. It's similar to the one before. Some people, I'll interview them like, I want to be CISO, I want to do your job. I'm like, great, because I sure don't want to do this job forever. But when they just say that and they can't really say anything else, it's like, do you just want a title? Because that's a yellow flag to me. I think what would really grab me to hire a good leader is if they could really articulate, who are you trying to make a difference for? By doing exactly what? What's your superpower? What do you think you can do? What have you done before that you can like polish and bring to the next level this time? And then finally, this is my last one. One thing that I do get for people who are at a crossroads and they're like, I'm a first-time manager, or, I'm an experienced manager, and I've got these two different offers. I've got one from Google and I've got one from like an SF or Vancouver startup. Which one should I go for? So first of all, that is not a fair question because number one, the job is not the same. What does that mean? So if you have the ability to lead AppSec at a company like Segment, it means you owned it end to end. You own that roadmap, you own the vision, you own your sourcing and recruiting and coaching people and promoting them. You own all of the problems with it. You own all of the victories. You're not depending on other teams to deliver something to you so you can make something. It's your job end to end to make something happen. So that means you and your team might be writing policies and standards. You might be building or procuring things like the scanners. You are going to have to interface with engineers to get them to understand like why secure coding is important. You're going to have to be innovative and figure out, how do I teach the rest of the organization that secure coding is important so that they want to come back to the second class. And then you need to come up with metrics to measure the success of what you're doing. You can't depend on anyone else. You have to be self-contained. And if that scares you, then, you know, a job at a really large company could be good, because there is some relative safety, because, you know, you do have a sliver of that job and you can learn to do it very, very well. And over time, you can start poking your head out and doing these other things. But when you come work at a startup, you're essentially a founder in that little area. So someone hires you to start CloudSec, you're the founder of the CloudSec area. And so it's all end-to-end use. So it's a lot of sweat and bullets. But I will tell you that when you ship your first things and you have your first victories, and then you get a lot of positive feedback from Eng or customers or the rest of the community, it's the best feeling in the world. But yes, there's a lot of risk. And number two, the job offer itself with the money is not the same. So why would that be? So I had a friend of mine, and she was doing exactly that. I'm thinking about Google, and I'm thinking about these two other startups. And Google is offering me like so much money, not a huge amount of stock, but so much money. And I really like money. And then these other two are offering me less money because they're not profitable, but then they're offering me this many shares. So my advice is, think long and hard about what your personal risk profile is. I'm the kind of person that, you know, shouldn't be, because I'm probably way too old to be doing this, but I'm all about go big or go home. So I will always go for the one that is the potentially larger lottery ticket and has more control over my fate. And so I will always choose a smaller company or a smaller division with a company where they're like, you can write your own ticket, but if you screw it up, you're gone. That for me is like really exciting. But at the same time, if you choose the larger company, you have relative safety. You know, the pitfalls of the market and the rises, and you won't really experience like that, oh my God, what's our stock price at? Can I pay my taxes? Can I pay my rent, or whatever it is? You won't have those issues because you will get that regularity, and it will make you feel, there's a part of every security person that needs that, that's like, oh, I feel relieved. But at the same time, you don't get a lottery ticket. And so you may not have that ability to, I don't know, get rich quick, or to be able to make that huge founder turnaround type story. So make sure you're evaluating these offers fairly, because they are not the same jobs. It really is how big you want to go as far as like what potentially the payout could be, or on the other end, no payout at all, and how much control you want and how much risk you're willing to take. And that is it for me on formal comments.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We're out of time, but there are a lot of questions on the Q&A. So Colleen, if you don't mind, just start typing out some of the answers to those questions on the chat while we introduce the next speaker. But thank you so much. I mean, I loved everything. I put so many notes down, and I'll definitely go and get that book made to stick. I wrote that down. So really appreciate your insights, and this is very inspiring. Loved everything that you shared. So I'm going to pass this back over to introduce the next speaker.
All right, our next speaker is John. Jen, are you here? Hi, John. By the way, there's a little fun story behind this slide while I was making it, and I didn't have information. I was waiting for an email from John to share his info, and I decided to look up any of the talks that he gave, and I came across a YouTube DEF CON 22 talk where John goes on stage with a bottle of champagne and offers champagne to attendees. I thought that was awesome. That made me miss DEF CON conference so much, the actual in-person conference. For those of you who don't know what DEF CON is one of the biggest hacker conferences, which usually is held in Las Vegas around August. And yeah, that just was so awesome. John, forgot to introduce. John is Information Security Officer at Plastic. John works at a large financial institution. For fun, he breaks software and infrastructure, keeps busy with research, mentoring, and building massive planetary distributed self-healing healing clouds while hacking satellites for fun.
Yeah, thank you for that intro. Kind of like what Colleen introduced of, hi, welcome to the interview process. People ask me about that video and similar ones where I like to say you have to speak to your audience, right? Where hi, DEF CON is a very different audience from say RSA or more defensive, compliance oriented conferences or type of institutions. So yeah, you can't get away with, hey everyone, champagne and drinks. So sadly, we're not meeting where effectively I'd probably end up doing the same thing for everyone, just kind of sit back and relax. But what I'll be kind of going over here in a minute, once I stop sharing, is we're going to talk about the after part of Colleen. Hi, you've accepted that offer. That is great. That is amazing. Congrats. Oh my gosh. Now what? So as we kind of go, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Cool.
Yep, we can see it.
So yeah, we're going to talk about how you're going to hit the ground running. But what's a little bit more about me is, sure, I have a bunch of Hall of Fame things attributed to my name, bunch of CVEs, old school Metasploit developer back when it was Perl, OWASP projects lurker as a more late, but used to be an old school contributor in the early days, to I sit on a bunch of foundations and special interest groups talking about things, write books, argue about the placement of a comma in an RFC standard or someone's proposal, but also being hands-on, moving certain open source projects or communities forward. But ultimately, I have way too many titles, education things that we can sit here and list about. But why you should kind of listen to me and pay a little bit of attention is, sure, I'm the information security officer at Plastic, also a brand ambassador at BugCrowd, but also a chief security researcher at Research Something. And what's interesting is when you end up playing with all those different things or working as a career path that I had, is you end up with, yes, you got that new job. Congrats. That's awesome. Like, yeah, this is awesome. I can't wait. And then I can disable, hey, recruiters. Yeah, don't send me new stuff. Okay, fine. Like, yes, that's awesome. But then that first day, that first week is, oh my gosh, everyone knows what they're doing. I have this imposter syndrome, or, oh, I feel so insignificant, or wait, you told me all of this stuff using terminology and vocabulary or certain institutional knowledge aspects. And you're like, what about that thing that goes to this thing? So I'm going to try to set you guys in that right path. So kind of before you get to that point of questions you might have missed asked during the interviewing process was, one, trying to determine the executive buy-in and the board's investments, more specifically, in your area, in your team, in this role. Try to suss out, will you have the resources and available to not only just be set up for success, but to later I can understand why certain things are how they are. But also, how's the company itself? Is it growing? Is it not? How's the department? You know, is it being through a lot of inconsistent changes? But kind of the real way to read the cultural tea leaves of how not only is security or application security perceived within the institution or also outside, is security a byproduct of compliance? Where, for instance, we have a WAF not to manage risk, but because PCI says so? Or is compliance a byproduct of security, where all of the audit trails, all of your controls framework is literally based upon the risk aspects of security or certain security dogmas? So it's always interesting to make sure, if you didn't ask that, get those answers in the first few days. Because ultimately in your first 100 days generically, irregardless of individual contributor, technical aspects, a hybrid role, management or leadership, you really, really want to focus on maximizing your success by traditionally creating really detailed programs for these notions that we'll talk about in a minute for the first few months. Set your priorities carefully and truly trying to avoid overcommitment. Yeah, try to stop and start with the first 5 pressing issues, then align with your manager on 2 or 3 for the first few months. correspondingly, if you're a technical role, avoid any type of leadership items or relative, unless it's absolutely required for your role or you need to earn respect, while also spending this time to focus on your security relationship with your peers, coworkers, and other partners. And then better and worse, even at large institutions with extreme amounts of maturity, you are going to spend significant amount of your time in a reactive manner, handling either unpredictable events or other people's lack of planning is now your emergency. But truly, just professionally, irregardless, it goes without saying to never say anything negative about the predecessors, implementations, roadmaps, technologies, processes, and actions in front of peers, stakeholders, or team. There are other places such as your one-on-ones with your manager or other such avenues to have those parts. But what's interesting when you go off, you're really focusing first on the outcomes of your first 100 days, your really soft skills, which a lot of security, special applications security focused individuals have challenges with, where communication, business or technical soft skills, but also the staff, the tooling, your peers. You have many, many opportunities to really focus on key communications, key deliverables where, hi, there's something new, someone new's here, people are listening and attentive, versus later on where people are like, or just kind of ignore or not paying attention to what you're doing on Slack or Teams. Well, also, you really want to ensure you're focused on specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely deliverables. Now, your institution may have different concepts of what is a goal or what are you meant to, but ultimately, you really want to focus on what they call SMART deliverables. Now, if you're in management, your first 100 days actually start 15 days prior to your start. There's a link there at the bottom that goes into all of the details, everything, expectations, questions, deliverables, things you should look for. But generically applied to all of the roles, you're going to spend the first negative 15 days preparation, but also your real outcome is to manage the expectations of this role and you, because this role was created, the board, more specifically leadership invested in this role for this program. Okay, I heard Colleen say, or hi, this is what we actually want you to do. So lots of preconceived notions. So, okay, how can we manage those? But your first 30 days is assessing what is the state of X. Your 15 to 45 is only plotting how do we get to there, but also correspondingly get to there. And this really helps you establish credibility. And then sure, later on, 45 to 100 is measurement of, hi, look at what I did. Look at my charts and graphs going up and to the right, or KPI metrics moving in XYZ manner, or hi, I made a difference. Now, these first 100 days, these phases drastically change depending on the maturity of the company itself, the product lines, or services or systems. So kind of take this as a broad stroke, but for management, it's definitely, you have 100 days to really get going. Now, from the technical side, there are many institutions where it'll take you months to even get up to speed to make an impact, because they have all these hairballed systems glued together behind the scenes that you have to work out and be a technical expertise on, but then you have to figure out how this all correlates to the rest of the security institution and programs, and how they've glued everything together from the asset inventories to hi, where do vulnerability scans results go, and how does everything kind of glue together within the security dogma itself. Well, on top of that, hi, you have to figure out how do we test the code? How do we build it? The more traditional software engineering aspects of, but then also the delivery aspects of this job. So you have a lot of work to go on, but the areas you should really focus on is one part I call vulnerability mountain, where someone probably turned on, or maybe you turning on, hi, tell us we have out-of-date third-party packages. Hi, what tool did you run X that determined Y vulnerability? But effectively pay attention to, and kind of sift through what are the classes of vulnerabilities, what are the traditional risks, that they've seen in the past that they've either managed to fix, manage workarounds, or chosen to accept said risk. Also correspondingly, do they have correlation or test coverage functionally of their relevant product line, system, or services, or assets? Then all the fun asks for mobile application, instrumenting the runtime environment, black box, white box, application security testing as a service, just high focus on those areas if applicable. But then also really get to understand the tech stacks, not only for the infrastructure, engineering operations, and engineering, but figure out if they adopted the framework or pattern to them, or if they adapt themselves to that part. But also on the other hand, you have all these policies and procedures that not only are expected to serve as a role model for, but you also need to understand so that you can understand why things are how they are or how they're not being done, which kind of gets to the kind of fun part is, what are the capabilities of your team? What are those investments? OWASP has its own project called OpenSAM. I've been involved with BSAM, but effectively both of them end up saying, instead of how to do AppSec, hi, here's what other institutions have done. Hey, maybe before you start a bug bounty program, you should think about how to handle vulnerabilities and get those processes ironed out before you opened up the floodgates coming in. So those who have a more compliance-oriented security program will end up having higher scores on compliance and policy, and probably less on the more proactive aspects such as attack models or software environments. So it's worth going through formally or informally, kind of measuring, what are we doing? What are our capabilities? What do I have to work with, regardless if you're executive, management, or an individual contributor. So effectively ask for the last few years of artifacts, compliance reports, anything, but this is more of a compliance trick. Look for the changes year over year. And if they've had findings, look at the management responses, and they'll kind of give you an idea of their trajectory and velocity in terms of improving or not, or status quo. But sadly, there's not enough time to just go on and on and on about everything else you should think about during your first 100 days. So what I'm going to try to do instead is focus on more situational, hi, this is tips and tricks I've learned over the years. So what's been interesting is we are all experiencing COVID. And what's interesting is when you're starting a job, already it's the most important and challenging part of any career. But now you're going to start remotely, where communication technologies, it's not easy to see nonverbal communications when they look away or roll their eyes in disgust, or sadly, many individuals will just disable their video camera, but correspondingly handling those cultural expectations. So be cognizant of that. I'm sure the HR team and others and your hiring manager will help alleviate a lot of those challenges, but just be cognizant. And then one of our previous speakers tonight, he and I were talking, and it was interesting, I'll just quote nearly directly, that in many ways, the most challenging year for our profession and personal careers is this last year. And there are far too many employees who just want to get away from their employers, like just get away. So mentally prepare for changes, where I would expect there will be a significant turnover within our industry, within our careers, especially in application security, once the new COVID normal is established. I'm already starting to see it start to pop up now as vaccine becomes much more widely distributed and affected, but especially once people start heading back into the offices or not office, depending on what that new normal is, just be cognizant of that. There's a great Harvard Business Review article on something that you really need to understand, because you'll see us at startups, where startups will have this heuristic, look at me, I just to keep the lights on, I have to stay up all night and do heroics just to keep the business functioning as usual. So it's worth understanding, is the company's approach being largely a product of individuals where you have to work very individualistic in nature, which allows you to say, hey, look at me, look at this impact that I made, that where they recognize those individuals who take initiative. Or is it more of a group focused where there's a safety net to take risk and rewards are shared, but it's really hard to stand up and say, hi, look, this is what I'm doing. Here's the value I'm adding or differentiating, your value accordingly. So worthwhile article, but also I can't say it enough. If you want to stay at an institution longer than 1 year, please network, network, network. Not only with your peers directly, but also across the organization and certain aspects, which is once again hard during COVID because you can't head down the cafeteria and say, hey, let's go grab a drink or grab lunch or some way to do that accordingly. What's interesting as well is your more R&D or technology focused CISOs, stereotypically known as your Silicon Valley CISO, but also likely at larger institutions, typically have a 2-year shelf life. Part of it is part equity. Also, the other part is just challenges in the role that are unique to CISOs and the leadership challenges at that level. So if you plan to stay longer, that just embrace changes as leadership goes amok. I've been at some institutions where the co-founder was still there, 15, 16 years later, doing security. But I've been at other institutions where they would shift through CISOs relatively every few months. So, mentally prepare. And application security roles, no matter what layer of the stack, typically have a longer shelf life, more so because of the specialty of the domain and the knowledge, but also those who really get in application security, as we know, are extremely, extremely passionate about what they do and love either building or breaking accordingly. But what's also kind of worthwhile to notice is there's this phrase, cattle are not pets, from the older days of Microsoft. But what's interesting is we start going through this movement, or already have, where we start having security as code or compliance as code or policy as code or just X more software defined objects. Is it's really critical to understand which systems, services, assets, code, tooling, entities are treated like a family pet versus a cattle, such that if you're trying to enact changes or working on or trying to sponsor or manage the risk, say for the random gibberish spam filtering service and it goes down, surprise, it's an all hands on deck scenario. Why? Because the CEO can't get his email. But if a very business critical service has a vulnerability, then we'll just take it out of production, patch it, or send it out back in a very inappropriate manner. But ultimately, remember, our peers within engineering, infrastructure, engineering ops are going through these changes to either enable software-defined infrastructures, services, or business logic. So funny enough, infrastructure now more so even in the traditional IT on-premise environments is moving towards a software-defined infrastructure, systems, services, and kind of gluing it all together, hence the DevOps world and vocabulary. But then also, funny enough, many engineering disciplines are moving towards a no-code aspect as well. So just be cognizant of what are the pets, what are the cattle, such that you can know how to navigate those accordingly or which items you need to pay particular attention to. But what's interesting for many of these roles, irregardless if you're a builder or breaker of application security, is you are an agent of change. So whom are the other change agents? Who are the decision makers? Do you need to influence them? How do you literally that of change? Well, what's interesting about us being humans and our nature is that we are resistant to change. So you can ask people, hi, who wants to change? Everyone will raise their hand. But when you're like, okay, who wants to change, right? Is challenging. So just be cognizant as you're networking, being an agent of change, who else are those decision makers? Who else are those very influential individual systems or services that are also agents of change? So to kind of the 3 simple things you should walk away from this discussion is effectively 1, change is hard. Congrats, literally, on the new step in your career. Not only just professionally manage expectations, what's expected of you with your manager, but also the executive and that role as well. You pretty much have 115 days of opportunities that may or more than likely dry up, especially as it gets farther outside of your immediate team or department or stakeholders. And then, yeah, leadership. You guys have been around for long enough where, yes, there are going to be many, many distinct challenges to the role for those who are middle management or more the tech lead aspect side. Yeah, it's going to be challenging, but it really depends on how much they have invested within that program, department, team, division. Is security a byproduct, or is compliance driving it? Or more of late, is privacy driving certain data security challenges, or why you need to do X? But for the individual contributors, what's exciting right now about application security is there's so much to do, so much new tooling. I would say new approaches. I mean, technically they're old approaches from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but re-implemented on new technology stacks. Or you may be able to introduce or use languages where you don't need to worry about buffer overflows anymore, or not need to worry about trying to memorize memory management challenges or new patterns of development. So with that being said, thank you guys. If you want to contact me, my Kioxide link has all of my info, URLs, and anything else if you need to get a hold of me. So truly, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, John. That was very informative, educational. Loved how you ended with change is hard and explaining that. And of course, thank you for being an awesome ambassador. As we're running short on time, there's actually a few questions in there for you from the audience. If you don't mind just answering a few Q&A through the chat. With that, I'm going to hand it back for the next speaker.
All right. Thank you, John, again. I definitely can relate to this talk. I just switched to a new role about 3 months ago, and I definitely feel myself as that baby Yoda from your slide. Like everyone else knows what to do, and I'm still figuring things out. By the way, can you see my screen?
No.
Okay. I think someone else. Oh yeah, here we go. All right. So our next talk is how to do security work in your current role by Divya. Divya is the security engineer manager for application security at Snap. She's responsible for corporate security and red team at Snap again. She has over a decade of experience in the information security field and has worked in security consulting and software engineering roles prior to Snap. Hi, Divya.
Hi there. Thank you for the intro. So just like my picture here, I'm actually going to look here, not on the camera, because my display, my laptop screen is broken. So apologies for that. All right. I'm going to share my screen now. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Divya, and today I'm going to talk about how you can contribute to security initiatives in your current role. And this talk is specifically for those of you or your friends who are not currently working in security, but are looking to transition into a security role in the near future. One second. All right, so I won't repeat my introduction. Ali did a great job. So instead, I'm just going to take a second to thank the organizers for organizing an amazing day of talks. And thank you very much for inviting me to speak here. All right, so how did I end up in the security field? when I started my career, I had a computer science degree, and I was working as a software engineer. And I was always interested in the security field, but I never knew where to start. There was nearly not enough information back then that there is today. And I decided, that I want to take a chance to try out moving into security. And so I quit my job as a software engineer, and I decided to move to the US to do a master's program in security. And while I was working on the master's program, I learned a lot of basics about network security and privacy and all of that. But my real interest was picked when I came across a web security course that from Stanford, and I don't remember who the professor was, but they had all their course material online. So I went through all the PDFs for various papers. I watched the videos, and they were all application security related, and I absolutely fell in love with the field, and I decided that that's what I'm going to do next. So I applied for various jobs, and I took up a consulting role at a company called ISEC Partners, which is now NCC Group. And for those of you not familiar with consulting, every 2 or 3 weeks, I would be sent to a customer's office, which would be a tech company in Silicon Valley. And I would look at a new product that they were about to release or acquire, and I would create a report that described everything that's right and wrong with it, and provide advice on how to improve the security of the product. And this was extremely hard for me, because every 2 or 3 weeks there was a new technology that I had to pick up, a new customer and a new product that I hadn't seen before. And so when I meet the customer for the first time and they'd ask me a bunch of questions, I would totally panic because I wouldn't know answers to a lot of their questions. And so in order to just avoid the embarrassment of looking stupid, I studied a lot overnight and over the weekends just to prepare and make sure that I know as much as I need to, and I represent my company well. So yeah, my strategy there was panic and prep. And why am I telling this story? Because I feel like continuous learning helps a lot. And through this consulting job, even though it was really hard, I was able to cultivate the learning mindset that I then ended up using in my subsequent jobs, and I use even today. After my consulting role, I joined Snap, and from the very first day, I realized they had a very clear mission of protecting customer data and privacy, and it was as important as the success of the product itself. And that really resonated with me, and I ended up working there for quite a while. I started off as a security engineer on a very small team, and I was able to grow with the team, the AppSec team, and then become the TL, and subsequently started managing the team. Very recently, I had an opportunity to grow beyond, outside of AppSec, and I picked up some responsibilities for the corporate security and the red teams. And so the lesson here is that never stop learning. And if you, it may seem really daunting at first, but there's a lot of really good security folks, very kind folks who will actually welcome you to the industry and help you navigate through it, just like they did with me. All right, so how do you get started if you are looking to move into the security field from another field? First things first, you need to develop security domain knowledge, because you not only need to understand the concepts, but also the lingo that people use in the industry. And that will really enable you to have a conversation about security or talk to a security person about various challenges they are facing, and learn and share ideas. So first things first, I would recommend reading as much as possible. I like Twitter because if you follow enough security people, you'll find a lot of references and links to articles and blogs and news, and you can start sort of creating an inventory of, blogs that you like, or sites that you like that you want, and or people you like, or videos that you want to follow. Another thing that I do even today is look at bug bounty reports that have been publicly disclosed by companies on various bug bounty platforms. And if you look at like the reports which have really high bounties, it's a good indicator of, what are the high impact bugs that companies care about. And you can learn a lot just by reading those reports. Last but not the least, security blogs. Again, you have to experiment a little bit, read a lot of blogs to actually understand what you like and what you don't. As similar with Twitter, like at some point you have to prune your feed to, help you just focus on the things that you actually like. Secondly, watch, and you're already you already have a great head start because you're here today. OWASP exists and you are attending meetups, so keep that up. YouTube has a lot of old conference talks that you can look at, but they also have channels. Many people have channels for things like cryptography, CTFs, like they walk you through CTF challenges as they do it. And so those are very great learning opportunities. I recently came across an app called Clubhouse. It's a new app that's only available on iOS. And every week I see at least one security talk where, and it's just a discussion forum, audio-based, and a lot of very good security people I know and respect, show up there and they just discuss a particular topic. And if you don't want to discuss, you can just quietly listen in. But you can learn a lot. I feel like I have learned a lot just by listening to some of those. And finally, apply the knowledge that you're gaining from reading and watching. Hands-on experience, or getting your hands dirty, is really going to give you a lot more experience and knowledge. And so sign up for CTFs. There's often teams that don't have a lot of security experience, and they don't win, but they learn a lot just in the process of being a part of the CTF. And Google for vulnerable applications, like especially if you're interested in application security. A lot of very good security people have built applications that are vulnerable on intentionally vulnerable, and they help you sort of learn attack techniques, mitigation techniques, and you can really up-level your practical experience from that. And while you're working on this knowledge base, you also can start creating opportunities at your company for picking up and doing some security work. And the way you can do that is find out which InfoSec team your team normally works with. Just ask your manager, like, is there a particular security team that we work with? What is the nature of the work? And just try to get some ideas on who the point of contacts for your team are. And if you don't have that relationship yet with any security team, then it's a great opportunity for you to actually go and build one. And I have some ideas in here about how you can look for those relationships. And this may vary from company to company, but I just wanted to provide a little bit of guidance around that. So if you're a product manager currently, it's very easy to get in touch with someone who works on application security or even privacy and just talk to them about your product. Say, like, this is what I'm building. What do you think can go wrong with this product? Like, what can I do better to keep security and privacy in mind? Very easy to start that first conversation. Similarly, if you're a software engineer, application security, cloud, or infrastructure security are great partner teams on InfoSec, and they will be very interested in the code that you're writing, the software that you're building, whether it's mobile, client, web, web applications, or backend code. If you work in IT or corp IT, they generally have a very close relationship with corporate security, because at the end of the day, corporate security will roll out tools like antivirus software or two-factor authentication or any monitoring software for suspicious activity on your laptops or Wi-Fi security, and they need alliances on the corp IT team to actually help them roll out all those tools. So if you work on corp IT, get in touch with someone on CorpSec. And if you are in a QA/testing field, whether you're doing manual testing or you're doing some sort of QA automation, the AppSec team will be very interested in talking to you, because at the end of the day, there's bugs and there's also security bugs. And if they can roll in some security checks into your QA tools, they will be very happy to do that. Again, these are just some examples. It's possible that you only have like one security team and no sub-teams, but I was hoping that this would give you some ideas on who you can talk to based on what team you're on. All right, so once you have that idea, go talk to them, because they typically, like, it might feel a bit weird to just go and approach someone out of context, but the reality is that good security teams actually want to meet you. They want a friend on every team possible, because when things go wrong, when there's security incidents, or when they want more information about a product, they need a point of contact on your team. And so you could be that point of contact. And so they'll be very happy to actually talk to you. And when you talk to them, you know, there's a bunch of questions that you can ask that I try to list a few of them here. But just try to understand like what they work on, what are some of the challenges they are trying to solve, what are the security problems that they are solving, what tools they build, and things like that. And as you keep talking to them, you can then start to ask them for access to certain things that you don't already have. So for example, if they have some sort of private wiki that you don't have access to with security projects, go ask them for that. Similarly with bug tracking queues, pen test reports, and so on. You can also ask them to invite you to any security talks that they might be doing within their team, and get to know as much as possible about the security organization, things they work on, the tools that they have, because all this will enable you to find integration opportunities with your team and your work and products. All right, so now that you have all this info, we can finally start to figure out what projects you can do to help your team, but also learn more about security and help you interact more with your InfoSec partners. So if you are currently a software engineer, there is a very high possibility that your team already has a list of security tasks or vulnerabilities that your team is responsible for. And you could be the one that takes those up. So just talk to your manager and say, hey, I'm very interested in picking up any security tasks that are on our team's plate. Could you assign me to those? And you can end up working on things like authentication for your product, or some sort of encryption, or you could even, now that you have information about like security tools, let's say a security team has a tool that scans your code for vulnerabilities, or has some other type of platform tool, for example, like a key management system that will help you store your credentials safely. Once you have that information, then you can start to find opportunities to integrate with those, and you can drive adoption for security tools within your team. And you can also start doing things like identifying security issues during code reviews. Think beyond just the regular, code, and analyzing code for bugs and scalability and performance and all that, and think what can go wrong from a security standpoint and give that feedback. You can also, if you're building a big product, or you're making a big change to your software or infrastructure, just to schedule a meeting, add a security engineer to the meeting and ask them for feedback, like do like a design review meeting with the security engineers. So basically doing all this, you're acting as a security advocate or champion for your team. And there could even be a formal champions program at your company. And typically when that exists, the security team provides a lot of knowledge, information, and training that is security related. And so you could really use that to your advantage. Similarly, if you are a infrastructure or DevOps engineer, you may be building tools or infrastructure that the entire company uses, and you are responsible for the security of that infrastructure. So if you're working on Kubernetes, talk to your InfoSec team and say, hey, what are the best practices for Kubernetes security? What can I do to harden my configuration? Similarly, if you're responsible for your company's CI/CD pipelines, or you're using some sort of infrastructure which requires you to harden your operating system, then those are great opportunities for you to collaborate with your security team and work on. If you're a project or product manager, you can actually really facilitate and drive all the security efforts for your team. You can prioritize, high impact security findings. You can prioritize security feature developments. You can schedule meetings and syncs with your security partners. And so there's a lot of opportunities there to just facilitate all those conversations. And we talked about this a little bit already, but if you work on corp IT, right, or your IT team, you can help roll out 2FA, antivirus, patching strategy, etc., with your CorpSec team. So yeah, I hope I've been able to give you information on how you can develop security knowledge and how you can get some hands-on experience to really spruce up that resume and go get that security job. So good luck. And shameless pitch from me, I am hiring for multiple roles on InfoSec. So whether you have security experience or you're just a software engineer looking to get into security, shoot your resume to that email. And thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Divya. I wrote down read, watch, and apply, and you started explaining about Clubhouse. So I'm like, I can't wait until it's on Android. So thanks for sharing your journey, how you moved into security. It's a topic that I'm so passionate about because there should be no barriers, and everyone's welcome to join in, as you heard from many of the other panelists about the importance of soft skill. As again, we don't have enough time to have Q&A, so there'll be some questions on the Q&A chat. If you can jump in and respond to those. And with that, the next speaker.
All right. Our next speaker is going to talk about a technical interview, probably the hardest part of the interview process. But I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. Our speaker is Pavan. Pavan is a security engineer at Databricks. He loves building security products, hacks for fun, and enjoys reading about security.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Let me present my screen. Give me a quick second.
All right, we can see it.
All right. Okay, perfect. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're having a great day. Firstly, I'd like to thank the organizers here for giving me the opportunity to engage with you all. A little bit about myself. I love building security products, enjoy reading a lot about security, and most importantly, I like to connect with folks like yourself. Today, especially, it's an important topic for me in my professional career, both when I've been looking for new opportunities and when I'm hiring. So I'd like to share, the experiences that I've gathered over the years of on being both sides of hiring, particularly focusing on technical interviews. So one way I look at technical interviews is that as a candidate, you do all your technical preparation really well. You have deep understanding of your domain. You understand your role. One thing that one pattern that I've noticed that most of us tend to ignore is that interviews are very short. It's 45 minutes, an hour, and there's a framework to it, and there is a success criteria to it. And hacking that is the most important thing, and being aware of that is the most important thing as a technical candidate. So today I'd like to focus on some of the frameworks, common frameworks that I've put together over the years, interviewing people, and then interviewing myself, right? So let's start hacking it, right? To start with, let's acknowledge the current trends. We are in COVID times, and it has brought changes to the industry. Working remote is here to stay, whether we like it or not. The industry is changing. There's cost benefit analysis. Regardless whether you're going to be working remote or on site, I'm pretty sure your interviews are always going to be remote because it's so cost effective. It's so easy to get people on schedule. So you need to acknowledge this fact and acclimatize yourself to this environment. So what can we do specifically for technical interviews? My first recommendation is, get acquainted to all sorts of digital whiteboards so that you can whiteboard technical components, or get acquainted to online coding editors, or if it's easier to just share like a Google Doc, get used to that and have it. If the interviewer is not prepared with those things, have some personal links yourself ready so that you can share it during the interview, because time is of most essence here, and you want to maximize the impact that you're going to have in that short period of time. So acknowledging this new trend is very critical, especially in the last year. Like at Databricks, we've been hiring like crazy, and we've lost good candidates just because of technical difficulties, and sometimes the candidate is not well prepared with these collaborative tools, or the interviewer is not prepared with them. So this is a must-do thing. Second, the most, I'm pretty sure, like I've heard all the speakers here. I think I want to really acknowledge two red flags that I keep coming across, and it gets highlighted in interview feedbacks. I don't want to spend too much time here. Like basically, lack of preparation really shows up. So if you, for example, let's say, for example, like I've scheduled a technical interview, and the candidate says, "Oh, I didn't expect to code. Oh, I'm not on my computer. Oh, I didn't log into my collaboration tool." And you waste like 10, 15 minutes in that process. So if you're not prepared, make sure you reschedule your interview, or talk to your recruiter. They're your best friends, or the coordinator, they're your best friends. And from technical interview, especially in security, from technical point of view, one big red flag, at least as an IC that I've seen, is not having or not demonstrating passion or depth in any particular domain, is kind of a red flag. I don't. If you're a newcomer if you're entering new into cybersecurity, this still matters. You might be a great, like you might have had experience in software engineering. We would really like to see that you are capable of, going deep into a particular domain and can demonstrate that skill. So these are a couple of red flags that you want to keep in mind, because they're like the deal breakers, especially during security interviews. The third is, this is where I want to get into the framework and kind of making sure you're hacking your interview within this framework, right? This is common across all types of interviews, right? There is a success criteria throughout your interview process, or in a technical interview. You're measured on your problem solving skills, you're measured on your collaboration, communication skills, you're measured on, can you take ownership of your responsibility, how passionate, how much depth do you demonstrate in your technical capabilities, and reflection, like what have you learned from your past mistakes. So these are some of the common success criteria. And I'd like to, show, how to maximize these success criteria during your interview process. Like when is the opportunity to maximize these, and also how to maximize these, right? So typically you have like 45-minute interview, and you have 5 minutes mutual introduction, then 5 to 10 minutes mutual discussion around, hey, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What is the objective here? So you spend close to 20 minutes or 15 to 20 minutes of your interview with questions and answers back and forth with the interviewer. So you only have like 25 to 30 minutes. So this time really matters, right? This is where you want to maximize your success criteria. I'm not saying, you don't have the opportunity to engage in interesting conversations in the rest of the time, absolutely. But you want to control and demonstrate your abilities during this specific period of time where you can actually drive the conversation, right? So how to maximize it, right? So pictures can speak 1,000 words. Let's say you're given a threat model. The question is, okay, let's threat model an API or a system. One thing that I want to make sure a candidate does is leverage the whiteboard. Make sure you put together like a system diagram. It shows your communication skills, ability to problem solve using the tools, and pictures usually communicate more than 1,000 words. So maximize your maximize the success criteria where you measure like communication skills. Then the second is, start with like a bird's eye view. You want to show that you can solve complex problems and break them down and solve it and put together the pieces, right? And also don't assume the interviewer knows all the details that you are going to throw at them. So always start with a bird's eye view. Start with, let's say, start with the attack vector or the attack surface and keep drilling down from there. If you're given a system design question, start with high-level components of it and then dig deeper into areas of this design where you can gauge the interest of the interviewer, or if they are interested, or if you are really interested or want to demonstrate your passion and depth in a particular field, you can drive the discussion into that specific component. It's another tool that you can leverage, starting with a big picture and then driving into different components and locking down on a component where you are really good at and go deep into it. And one thing to realize is that as an interviewer, like I'm looking for your strengths, and I want to see how good you are at it, rather than trying to identify weaknesses, right? Because we know, we can learn on the job, so those are given. So it's really important to maximize your strength and demonstrate. This is really key. Like there have been so many post-interview roundtables where demonstrating passion or depth has been one of the biggest criteria for success, yes or no, at least for an IC candidate that I've come across. So keep that in mind. Then last thing, treat it as a brainstorming session and not as a question and answer session, because eventually you're also measured on your collaboration and teamwork skills, right? The more effective you're brainstorming with the interviewer, more likely than not, they're going to enjoy. They're going to go out with the feeling that, hey, I like working with this person. It was and I learned a few things from this person, and it was an engaging conversation. So, and also you score and maximize one of your other success criteria, which is collaboration. So rinse and repeat this process, because interviews it's a short period of time. Keep the criteria in mind. Try to look out for opportunities where you can maximize these criteria, and apply this framework over and over. And some fail, some go really well. So, but I've seen, more often than not, when eventually scoring or gathering feedback for the candidate, this is how we typically structure it. So having this framework when you are going for an interview is really useful. If everything fails, this is my fallback, right? Sometimes you're having a bad day. Make sure keep building your brand, right? References, back channels. Like we've hired candidates where they've had a bad interview, but they have great network, great feedback, great references, great back channels, and then we hire them because interviews are it cannot be black and white. There's a gray area. So that is my go-to, and regardless, as cybersecurity professionals, we should aim to build our brand, network with people where we can add value and learn from others, and try to aggressively and passionately learn about a topic, domain, and share it within our network to improve your brand image within that network. And last but not the least, learn new things. Sometimes passion finds you. So that is pretty much that's pretty much it.
Fantastic. That was awesome. I love to echo what you just said, which is fail to prepare, prepare to fail. And it's so true. So the more prepared you are, the more you're comfortable. And, to your point, it's okay if there's something that you didn't answer correctly or didn't do well, keep working at it, right? And practice as you go along, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Alia, where has time gone? Oh my gosh, I can't believe when we were first working on this, we were like 2.5 hours is a long time, right? And here with a blink, it's gone fast. Amazing speakers. I hope you all found it useful. I've seen so many questions about the recording, if we can have slides, things like that. So just some closing notes, and then Alia will close off. First is, you've seen Jeevan has put a post in there, which is a link to feedback form. We want to hear from you. So how you found today's session. So please fill that out. The more that you can fill, the better we can continue with our next meetups and focus on what you're looking for. Second thing is, stay tuned for the next meetups on Vancouver OWASP meetup or on the Bay Area meetup. And then the last part is, I guess from my part, is Asante, Shukriya, Merci, and thank you to all of you for staying on. I'll pass this over to Alia to close off.
All right, thank you, Arti. And as just to close this off, I want to thank you, everyone, every single one of you, for coming here after Tuesday, after probably a long day at work, for staying with us all the way till the end. I want to thank you, our panelists, for giving such great talks, giving so many awesome tips. Like I wrote down a lot of them and probably go over my notes later this week again. And I want to thank you, RT. I want to thank you, our OWASP organizers as well. I want to thank you, our attendees, our guests, and everyone who just joined today. Thank you for being active. I was looking at the chat. Thank you for supporting each other. I saw that someone will ask a question and then there will be a person replying to that question, sharing tips. Thank you for that participation. I hope you learned a lot today and you're living this meeting with something new, like with maybe a new connection or maybe a new piece of knowledge. Yeah, stay tuned. As RT mentioned, there will be other meetups organized by OWASP event. And yeah, just thank you again. RT, do you have anything to add?
Thanks, Alia, my co-host. It was so much fun doing this with you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Hope you have a good night.
Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.